Russian envoy to the United Nations Vitaly Churkin says Iran is playing an active role in the fight against the Daesh terror group. Churkin was commenting on the recent remarks made by U.S. President Donald Trump, who branded Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism. Russian President Vladimir Putin has put the Air Force on high alert for, quote, a time of war. The Defense Ministry says it has been ordered to do what it calls a snap check of the aerospace forces. This comes after NATO's deployment of troops as well as military hardware at Russian borders. U.S. President Donald Trump and his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan have agreed to work together regarding the Daesh-held Syrian cities of Al-Bab and Raqqa. In a phone call, Trump and Erdogan also discussed issues including a safe zone in Syria, the refugee crisis, and the fight against terror. Students have walked out of their classes in New York to protest U.S. President Donald Trump's policies. They have chanted slogans against Trump's recent travel ban on immigrants, as well as his pick for Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos. Protesters say DeVos has no experience in education. Two U.S. rights groups have filed a complaint against immigration officials over what they call systemic abuses and violations of legal immigrants' rights. The groups have accused customs and border officials of holding people for hours without food at airports following Trump's travel ban. French protesters have once again marched in Paris to condemn the sexual abuse of a black man in police custody. The demonstrators have expressed outrage at the abuse and called the police murderers. They have burned a car and sprayed graffiti on the walls demanding justice for the victim, identified as Theo. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says Western sanctions against Russia cannot be lifted due to renewed clashes in eastern Ukraine. Ukrainian and pro-Russian forces have been exchanging accusations over the violence which has rather killed dozens. Merkel has already urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to use his influence to stop the fighting. And the Colombian government has begun talks with the country's second-largest rebel group, the National Liberation Army, to end more than 5 decades of deadly conflict. The negotiations follow 4 years of successful talks with FARC rebel which resulted in a historic peace deal last year. Elsewhere, U.S. President Donald Trump and his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan have explored ways of cooperation in the fight against Daesh in Syria. In a phone call, Trump and Erdogan agreed to act together regarding the Daesh-controlled Syrian towns of Al-Bab and Raqqa. The two leaders also discussed issues including a safe zone in Syria, the refugee crisis, and the fight against terror as well. Reports say Erdogan called on the U.S. not to support the Syrian Kurdish YPG militia. Turkish sources say that CIA Director Mike Pompeo is to visit Turkey on Thursday to discuss the YPG. Author and peace activist Ryan Dawson joins us now from Osaka, Japan. Mr. Dawson, welcome to the program. Let's talk about the recent conversation that U.S. President Donald Trump had with the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The two are discussing issues taking place in Syria, as if Syria itself is not even a party to the conflict that is taking place, when Syria has also mentioned that these actions that are taking place in Syria, most notably what Turkey is doing, is in clear violation of its sovereignty.
Yes, well, Turkey has been, in the past, was covertly funding al-Sham and al-Nusra, and they had a huge contraband of oil coming illegally into Turkey. The Russians, immediately upon entering the fray, saw that and blew up the tankers. The U.S. pleaded ignorance, as if they were just simply unable to find these oil tankers going to Turkey. But that has been ended, and a lot of this covert support for the losing side, these Wahhabi mercenaries, is dwindling from Turkey. The U.S. has a new administration, and about the only thing Donald Trump has right is a commitment to attack what he calls jihadi Islam, or Wahhabis, and to stop fighting with Assad. But they need to be coordinating things with Syria primarily, above anything else. They do seem to be finally listening to the adult in the room, which is Vladimir Putin, on what needs to be done. But Turkey is very disingenuous in this. They just don't want Kurds in Raqqa and carving off any peace or claims to a future Kurdistan or balkanization. That's why these Kurdish groups were not even involved in the last peace talks.
Office of the Attorney General has requested a stay on Judge James Robart's restraining order against the president's executive order on immigration. Both sides made the case in front of Judges Canby, Friedland, and Clifton in the Ninth Circuit. The government made the case the president should have the authority under the guise of national security to determine who enters the country. Tonight may not be the last chapter.
President, how far are you willing to take your travel ban fight?
Oh, we're going to take it through the system. It's very important. It's very important for the country, regardless of me or whoever succeeds at a later date. I mean, we have to have security in our country.
Is it going to go to the Supreme Court, you think?
Good, and we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't have to. It's common sense.
The appeals court has yet to render judgment, nor did they say when they would. For more on the ban and the fight in the courts, we're joined tonight by legal analyst Lionel of Lionel Media. Lionel, it doesn't take a media expert or legal expert or attorney to see that and to experience, so to speak, the aggressive nature of the judges on this panel tonight when the government was presenting its case. Your thoughts on what you saw?
Well, when you talk about the federal government versus the Washington state government, Ed, what was the most telling and what was the most interesting was normally the phrase is a court looks at the four corners of the document. In this particular case, the executive order. That's it. What does this executive order say about these countries, this situation now? They were talking about and referenced repeatedly statements made by candidate Trump, Rudy Giuliani, President Trump, extrajudicially, extra-legislatively, so to speak. And the issue that was astounding to me is, what does that have to do?
Yeah.
Now, the argument could be that that showed the intent of this. What's also interesting is, what is the irreparable harm? Because there are two conditions here. There must be irreparable harm and a likelihood of success later on. What is the irreparable harm? What they're alleging is that this harm is a violation of the Establishment Clause, namely that certain religions were being banned. And what I thought was, very frankly, a poor showing on the part of the Justice Department, because if you're a betting man, Ed, they're going to lift that ban. Guaranteed, and it's going to go to the Supreme Court.
The Justice Department attorney said at least don't allow those who have not been in the United States to enter. I thought that was almost a statement of surrender.
Well, you can look at it that way. The argument started from, does the president have the right to do this? And the answer was yes, of course.
This is a Fox News alert. We are awaiting a decision from the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals about President Trump's temporary travel ban. As soon as they rule, we will bring you that news live. But first, at a press conference yesterday on Capitol Hill, Democrats, while they were a little bit confused about current events when attempting to attack President Trump. You can't make this up. Take a look.
I have not called for the impeachment yet. He's doing it himself. Whether he's talking about his relationship to Putin and the Kremlin, knowing that he is responsible for supplying the bombs that killed innocent children and families in Aleppo. And the fact that he is wrapping his arms around Putin while Putin is continuing to advance into Korea.
We've seen nothing that we can work, well, I can work with President Bush on, and I'm disappointed because I thought that there might be some interest because of what he said in the campaign.
Did you see the faces of Maxine Waters and the other guy behind her? President Bush, Russia invading Korea. Joining us now with reaction, the host of Tommy on the Blaze, Tommy Lahren, who is a social media sensation. I met you at the, what was it, the inauguration of Donald Trump, and at one of the after parties. And I didn't get a chance to ask you, but I've seen like these viral videos of you where you have 45 million people watching you. And I'm going to break all the rules, but you're not politically correct, so I can. You're 24 years old, and yet you're so conservative, which, by the way, warms my heart. How did you become so conservative?
You've got to be honest. I think political correctness is intellectual dishonesty, and I don't even know if I'm necessarily conservative. I'm honest, and that often lends itself to conservatism. I'll agree with you. But I mean, listen to Nancy Pelosi. Listen to the farm team for the Democratic Party. They might as well be picking out their pantsuits for Trump's 2020 inauguration. It's that bad.
You know, it really is that bad. But how did you develop, like, for example, I don't know why when I was young and a teenager, I had the radio on. My parents weren't saying turn off the TV. They were saying, shut that radio off. I can't take it. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd be listening to great pioneers of talk radio. Where did you develop, well, I won't say conservative, but let's say conservative, libertarian, maybe, ideology, philosophy? Because that's unusual. 24 years old, to be fearless, outspoken on television, and, you know, and getting as much popularity as you are.
Well, you know, I grew up in that area of the country that's between the two coasts, you know, the forgotten Americans. I grew up there, and I had parents that were hardworking, average, everyday Americans. That also lends itself to conservatism. But I got to tell you, Sean, I grew up watching this mainstream media and seeing a lot of the BS perpetuated by the mainstream media, and I wanted to grow up, and I wanted to combat that. So I started off at an early age, and we're just getting started.
Did you support President Trump?
You know, I didn't from the outset, but when he became our nominee, it was a clear choice. It was Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And then the more that I got involved with some of the campaign activities, the more I heard President Trump speak, I got on board mostly because I saw so many average, everyday Americans in the military and law enforcement, the blue-collar Americans. I saw them gravitating towards him because they said, guess what? This man is doing something amazing. He's running against the Democratic Party and in some ways, the Republican Party as well, and he won.